The media lied about Comey, and Newt Gingrich just exposed his evil plans in this video. Former FBI Director James Comey testified on Thursday that he is the one behind the leaks of the account between him and President Donald Trump. He thought that it would lead to a special prosecutor. He was right. It did. Newt Gingrich doesn't like that. Look what he said below. The conversation starts at 3 minutes and 45 minutes again.
Of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He had the option of the next one, which will be out in October. It's called Vengeance. And in our novels, we do a number of things that are pretty daring about Washington. But the idea that the Federal Bureau of Investigation top person, the man who's in charge of criminal investigations for the entire federal government, that he would go outside the system, deliberately manipulate the system. And that's what he's done. And I think what that brings into question is whether or not the Congress should shut down the independent counsel because it is poisoned fruit. The independent counsel, by Comey's own testimony yesterday, was created because of his manipulation, because of his leak, because of his deliberate intent to force it to happen. Now, since we now know that he's a very bitter person, and we know how deeply he disliked Trump, doesn't that sound more like this is not about law and order, this is not about justice, this is not even about investigating potential crimes. This is a bitter man trying to get even by trying to cause as much pain for the president as he can. And I think it puts into doubt the entire process of the current independent counsel. And I think the entire process by which they made the decision to do it has to be re-examined. Remember, this is not my allegation. This is Comey's own personal statement that that's what he did. On the other front, Comey's testimony, ironically, completely exonerated President Trump on the Russian question. When you have people who are clearly the president's opponents come out and say flatly, Chris Matthews, hardly a supporter of Donald Trump, came out yesterday and said, you know, after this testimony, no reasonable person can believe that Donald Trump had anything to do with the Russians. That's a pretty big breakthrough in Trump's favor. And I think that's the other thing that came out of all this. There is no smoking gun. I was very struck many years ago. Wendy's ran an ad campaign called Where's the Beef? And they were sort of taking on Burger King and McDonald's and arguing that you got more burger from Wendy's. And so there this whole series of ads where people were looking for Where's the Beef? And Gary Hart was running as a New Ideas candidate for the presidency in 1984, and he was taking on Walter Mondale. And they got to a big debate, a key debate for the Democrats. It was at the Fox Theater in Atlanta. And I was actually allowed, it'd be hard to do this today, but I was actually allowed to go as a media commentator. And I was already a congressman, but I was there as a media commentator. In fact, David Broder of the Washington Post walked up to me and said, no, you can't be in here. You're either one or the other. But in fact, I was there. Well, at a key point in the debate, Gary Hart's going on about the need for new ideas and all this stuff. And Mondale turns and just says very casually, Gary, I don't get it. Where's the beef? And Hart was just stunned. He couldn't answer him. He couldn't say 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's where we differ. Well, I get this sense. I keep watching these news reports. I keep hearing commentators who hate Trump use huge earthquake, bombshell, things that you look up and you think, wow, this is going to be a big deal. And in fact, I want to ask, where's the beef? What's the complaint? Now we know there's no evidence that the president engaged with the Russians, so what's the whole deal? This is one of those things where the investigation continues because the investigation continues, and it doesn't matter that the investigation is proving there's nothing there. We'll just bring in more people, we'll have more interviews, we'll try even longer. So I thought yesterday was a very revealing day, and you could tell it, by the way, if you watch the news media coverage. If it's a place that hates Trump, they clearly thought that Comey was brilliant. If it's a place that did not hate Trump, they clearly thought that Comey had made a bunch of major mistakes and had in fact embarrassed himself. Now, Juan Rivera Rentas says would purposely leaking his own memos to knowingly trigger the appointment of a special prosecutor be obstruction of justice in itself? I honestly don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a historian. I don't know if it would be obstruction of justice. I do know that it is manipulation of the system. I do know that it is everything that sickens people.
Correct.
About what they call the swamp.
Yes.
I think it's, frankly, I wouldn't have put it in a novel. I think it's a stage too far. And yet, you clearly have Comey from day one deeply disliking Trump. You have Comey having very bad interaction with Trump. And you have Comey decide, I'm going to do what I can to cause the president as much pain as I can. And doing it by going outside the system, deliberately leaking to a friend of his who's a professor, and having that guy take it to the New York Times, which of course, since it's the leading anti-Trump publication, or tied with the Washington Post as the leading anti-Trump publication, it was weird. I mean, the Times was thrilled to publish it, and it led to what Comey wanted. But my question for the Congress, my question for the House and Senate Judiciary Committees is, shouldn't you be investigating whether or not, in fact, there was a legitimate reason to appoint this independent counsel? And whether or not, in fact, the current independent counsel is the right person, since he was apparently Comey's choice?
Correct.
And isn't this whole thing just a little sick and totally a violation of the rule of law?
Yes.
And a very personality-driven, emotionally laden process. Okay. Patricia Janfili says, why didn't any of the senators ask Mr. Comey what else he may have leaked to the press, either directly or through one of his friends? Well, somebody should have. Maybe they should submit a question to him today and ask him to tell him, did he, for example, share his testimony with Robert Mueller, the independent counsel? Did he share it with anybody else? What other things has he leaked over the last year or two? How many of the leaks that people were blaming on the Trump White House actually came out of the FBI director's office? I think all those are good questions. I will give Senator Susan Collins credit. She's the one who asked the question that led him to talk about having leaked. And I think she deserves real recognition for having asked the best question of the entire hearing. Patty Arvidsson says, do you have faith in the special prosecutor Robert Mueller's ability to conduct an unbiased investigation? No. Zero. None. Let's start with a practical reality. 97% of the political contributions in the Justice Department in 2016 went to Hillary Clinton. 97%.
Mm-hmm.
That's about 33-1. Now, in that setting, what do you think the culture's like? How many of those attorneys do you think want to get Trump? How many of them do you think are bitterly opposed to his policies? Now that we know that this was all a deliberate setup by Comey, I think it puts in question the entire process by which Mueller was chosen, the entire process by which they decided. If they decided to set it up as Comey thinks and said yesterday, because of his leak, this whole thing is sick.
Correct.
It has nothing to do with the rule of law.
Right.
Everything to do with the kind of petty search for vengeance that we associate with third world countries or with Shakespearean plays. Diane Frederick says, why isn't a full investigation of Loretta Lynch being done for intimidating Comey, so he said, and influencing him during the email investigation?
Right.
You know,
great question.
For better or worse, Republicans have a remarkable inability to pursue information that would hurt their opponents. I don't know whether they think somehow that will make their opponents like them more. I don't know whether it goes back to what they were taught as children. But if you watch, Democrats are very enthusiastic about going after their opponents. Republicans are not.
Correct.
And there are a number of good questions. No one has ever really put under oath both Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton to say, what did you guys talk about on that airplane?
Right.
And it doesn't pass a laugh test.
Correct.
But I think that what Republicans ought to focus on is closing down the independent counsel.
Yes.
He's not independent.
Yes.
He apparently is very close to Comey.
Yes.
We know Comey hates Trump. You have to assume that that has to leak over to Mueller.
And sorry to interrupt, WikiLeaks also had the thing that Mueller was compromised also. WikiLeaks has said it about Mueller, that he has ties with Comey.
I have to assume that the people Mueller's going to bring in are essentially Justice Department people who were 33-1 in favor of Clinton over Trump. This clearly cannot be an honest, independent investigation.
No, no way.
Elaine Duhamel says, why is it with all the crimes that have been committed that no significant person responsible has been arrested?
Right.
I think that's a very good question. And in my book, Understanding Trump, I talk at length about how really different he is because he's a businessman, he's an entrepreneur, he's not part of the Washington swamp, he doesn't understand the games that are played here. That's one of the things that I think keeps him permanently in trouble with the news media. He behaves like a businessman, he does not behave like a traditional politician, and they just don't get it, and it keeps him permanently confused. But I think in that setting, there's a young woman, 25 years old, who has been arrested and is being threatened with 10 years in prison. Now, for leaking secrets. Now, my question is, how can you talk about the rule of law? How can you talk about America standing for justice if this 25-year-old woman, who apparently made one mistake, is potentially facing 10 years in jail, and Hillary Clinton's thousands of emails don't count? Nothing that Comey has done counts. Nothing that the Attorney General under Obama and the former President of the United States did, meeting privately on an airplane just before a decision was made about Mrs. Clinton, doesn't count. This isn't the rule of law. This is the rule of influence peddling. It's the rule of prejudice. It's the rule of, in some cases, hatred. But it's not the rule of law. And I think America, in that sense, is on a knife's edge. And the question is going to be whether President Trump, his supporters, and the Republicans in the House and the Senate have the courage to stand up and fight against the huge forces of the deep state, which were personified yesterday in Comey's testimony. I hope you get a chance to look at Understanding Trump. I think it'll help you get a better sense of why the left is so crazy and so enraged. I think it'll give you a better sense of how Trump operates, what he's trying to accomplish. But this is a serious time for America, and I appreciate your taking the time to be with me today. Thank you very, very much.
We thank you. We thank you. What I don't understand is what that lawyer, his name, the Alan Dershowitz, that he said, he's a lawyer. He said that Trump has the authority to demand that Comey end the Flynn investigation. You know, and what's going on? I have no idea. Let us know what you think in the comments below, but Newt Gingrich hit it right on the nose. And again, thank you for watching.